So if you don't sleep enough, what happens is you have that residual
gunk.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah, good. So you do need that time in order to actually cleanse your brain, and you're not going to be able to get that based on the stages of sleep. So you need to get 7-8 hours sleep.
Yeah. And that's generally what's recommended. And then I would also say to people, like, when do you feel your best? On those days where you have consecutively 7-8 hours of sleep, maybe you feel better with 8.5 hours. Welcome to Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm your host, Jenn Trepeck, talking wellness and weight loss for real life. We're here to clear up the myths, misinformation, bad science, and marketing to teach you how to eat and how to cheat. Are you ready? I'm having salad with a side of fries. Hey friend, welcome back to Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm your health coach and host, Jenn Trepeck, here with you every week for Wellness Without the Weirdness. And joining us today is the person actually who coined the phrase wellness without the weirdness, that I've totally commandeered it. But so friends, please meet Frank of Earworthy. He is the podcast critic who recommended Salad with a Side of Fries. You were also at the live event this year, so now I'm honored to have you on this side of the mic.
Oh, well, Jen, thank you very much. I am so excited to be here. I am a longtime fan, and being at the live event with my cousin who begged me to go because he loves the show as well was really so much fun. And we learned a lot as well. And the third part is we got some delicious food. Doesn't get much better than that. Food, information, and fun. Wow. So thank
Love
you.
It.
Yeah, great to be here.
Yeah, and thank you also for the phrase wellness without the weirdness.
Well, I love that one, and it's so apt for your show. It really is. And I'm glad that you commandeered it. That is absolutely great. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. And thank you also, just at the jump for all that you have done in terms of sharing me and the show and all of those things. It's really, truly very appreciated.
You're welcome. I'd like to say that I did it out of a sense of humility. However, I really have to say it's really out of the sense of how good the show is. Quality of the show is amazing. And for people who are listening who probably don't know me, although I'm a podcast reviewer, I really focus on independent podcasts. And I have to say that I know your show is 5 years old. I think it was 3.5 years ago. I found the show because another indie podcaster, I was complaining to them about a celebrity who started a health and fitness podcast, and I listened to it. And it turned out that she was getting information from her fitness trainer who's whispering in the background. This is the QT, the gossip on this podcast. So she said, well, I have this great podcast for you. Listen to it. So I listened once and then was hooked from then. And as I've written before, one of the best things about podcasts is that when you listen to one, there's generally an archive. And I went back and listened to 1.5 years of archives. And every once in a while, I'll pick an episode depending on what's going on in my life and listen to it. And generally, it's extremely helpful. I needed it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And that's why we're here. So this week is our top 10 of 2024. And full disclosure, this is really our personal top 10. It's not based on data. It is not based on anything other than our preferences. So Frank, you picked 5, and then I picked 5, and we're going to share those 10 with all of you. A little spoiler, there's also a couple bonus if we have time for it.
Yeah.
So
all right.
Awesome.
First of all, I want to say that picking these 5, I feel like I'm the surrogate for the listener, because you have quite a bit of expertise, which a lot of your listeners don't have your level of expertise, and I'm sure they have their own, but I don't either. And so the great part about it is I feel like I'm the surrogate saying, as we're going through these, you're more of the expert and I'm more of the listener who doesn't have that. So that's great. And then the second part of that, before we go much further, is for the listeners that don't know, in January of this year, Earworthy, and it's a panel of people that I work with, awarded Jen and Salad with a Side of Fries, the best health and wellness independent podcast of 2024. So certainly you deserve that. That's fabulous. And if I can give all the folks who may read Earworthy in the next couple of weeks a spoiler alert, we're doing the best of podcasts in late December, like a lot of people do, and the best health and wellness podcast for the year, not surprisingly, is salad with a side of fries. So you heard it here first.
Oh, that's awesome. Frank, thank you so much. And I have to tell you, I was so humbled and honored to receive that award from you. And really, it's so appreciated to hear your feedback and, your and your colleagues and friends and families' experience listening to the show. So really, it means the world. Thank you.
Oh, well deserved.
Thank you. All right, friends, we're going to get into our top 10 really quick, though. We got to tell our members what they're getting this week. All right, so members, I'm sending you 2 recipes. Now, to sort of conclude the year, every year, I like to send you guys salad recipes and fries, right? Fitting. This year, though, I'm taking some liberties on those recipes. So first, your salad, in air quotes, is a recipe for healthy creamed spinach. There's actually no cream in it at all, but I promise, I don't love cream spinach, and I love this one, but I do think even if you do love cream spinach, this one's going to hit the spot. And then your fries, in air quotes, are a recipe for healthier potato skins. So these 2 could be great sides or even apps for your New Year's dinner if you're eating at home or going to a potluck kind of thing. So highly recommend give these a shot sooner rather than later. And then since it's December, the last month of the quarter, it's time for your live Q&A. So it's a one-on-one, just you and me, whatever you want to discuss. So I have loved the conversations we've had so far this month. I can't wait to connect with the rest of you. And by the way, there are still times available in January. So if you're feeling like things are hectic, don't worry. Times available in January. Just make sure you book it before January 1st. All right, if you want these recipes or the one-on-one, just you and me, be sure you're a member. Go to glow.fm/salad with a side of fries. For just $10 a month, you get weekly recipes, a monthly article or tool, extra discounts from me and our partners, plus access to live Q&A sessions. It's a total deal. When you take advantage of the full offerings, you're going to save far more than that $10 cost. I say it all the time. It is a no-brainer way to show yourself that your health is a priority. Plus, being a member supports this podcast and this community so we can continue to do this with you every single week. So remember, you're going to go to glow.fm/salad with a side of fries, or just click the URL in the show notes because that's a lot easier. Once you're there, you're going to click the little I agree button and then enter your email and payment info, click subscribe, and you're all set. You'll get this week's recipes for the healthy creamed spinach and the healthier potato skins, plus access to your quarterly live session, just you and me. All right, Frank, kick us off. Number 1 of our top 10, or maybe it's a countdown, 10, whatever, it doesn't matter.
Okay, I'm ready.
Go for it.
All right. Okay, so number 1 is episode 235, Top 3 Reasons and Remedies for Weight Loss Resistance, featuring Becky Bell.
Yeah, so for everybody, this aired January 31st of 2024. Frank, what'd you love about this one?
Well, first of all, it's a timely episode. The end of January and the January in any year is always the time where people are making their resolutions and they really get serious about weight loss again if they've lost that during the year. So I found that was really timely. Secondly, is that Becky Bell and some of the others that I chose, I find that your guests, which I love, seem to espouse sort of the same general philosophy that you do. But we'll talk later about a few episodes. And I think that that's great. I mean, there's a nice symmetry there where they're basically saying some of the same things you are. So on to Becky Bell, who was great. She talked about the fact that people, there's struggle with weight loss and there's problems with losing weight. And so we get frustrated by that. But then she gets into, which I thought was counterintuitive, but really great. She talks about the stimulation of cortisol, stress control, the resilience to stress, and stress management. And then, so in a sense, what she's saying is stress alone is one of the factors in not losing weight, even if you're doing everything else correctly. And I found that somewhat counterintuitive, and that was a revelation.
Yeah, and how many of us are stressed by our weight, right? So it's sort of this conundrum where, we're trying so hard and almost having that vice grip on the process of trying to lose weight stops the process.
Right. And to tie in your episodes as they work together, there's another episode this year in which one of the guests, one of the experts says, I didn't do anything different and I gained 15 pounds. And when I went back and looked at the reason I did, it had nothing to do with my diet or exercise routine. It was the fact that in my life right now, I was undergoing a lot of stress and I wasn't getting very much sleep. And once I solved those two problems, the weight came off. And I don't think that's a solution that a lot of people would look for. That's the last thing they'd actually look for is they would be, I have to eat less or I have to exercise more. So these things all tie together.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like I said it in the episode with Becky Bell, and I'll say it here. Like that episode, everything we talked about there applies to the people who are super consistent and feel like it's, quote unquote, not working. So if that's you, go back and listen to this one with Becky Bell. I agree. I like that one.
And the two other pieces that she talked about, you talked about together, was also the role of inflammation.
Yes.
Talked about that for quite a while, and blood sugar balance. And I thought those two factors are extremely important in weight loss.
Yeah. So those were the top three reasons, right? In the title, It was the stress, the inflammation, and the insulin resistance. So amazing.
Okay.
All right. I think we're ready for number 2. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Number 2. So this one aired April 24th, episode number 247, called Coin and Cuisine, Commonalities Between Money and Food. So this was one of my picks. And I chose it because similar to the one that we did about connecting our phone habits with our food habits, there's something about the money behavior and also the money conversation. Like I was really blown away as I started to dig into this about how similar these things are. Like money and food or weight management challenges, we're taught to not talk about it. It's these things that we are supposed to know, but no one really ever teaches us. And so this became one of my favorites of the year because I really don't hear anybody talking about this. And similar to what I said in the one about our phone habits, for some of us, it might be easier to start with the phone. For some of us, it might be easier to start with the money rather than starting with the food. And so it gives us a way to start to move in the direction of shifting habits and behaviors and recognizing the awareness of our own behaviors. And so if it's easier for you with the money, do that first. And then we can translate that same stuff to the food and the nutrition and things like that.
Yeah. And one of the takeaways I got from this episode was this whole idea of money and food combined as an obsession. And I know that in addiction counseling, counselors will also talk to their patients and say, sometimes people trade one addiction for another. And in some cases, it might be drugs for gambling or for drinking. I think it's just the same connection here is that people who have an obsession with money have an obsession with food. And as you said, both of those obsessions are not areas in which we're going to spend a lot of time talking to other people about that, somewhat secretive about that.
Yeah. And as you're saying that, it reminded me too, both of these things are also really tied to self-worth, right? There's this connection between net worth and self-worth and between our body and self-worth. And so with that, I think there's a lot to explore. So highly recommend everybody go back to that one. All right, Frank, let's do number 3. This one was one of yours. This was one of your picks. It aired March 27th, obviously of 2024, episode 243, Unsubscribe, Food Tracking Apps and Diet Culture, featuring Nicole Hagen.
Now, this one, Jen, was for me very powerful because in the beginning of the episode, she goes to her OBGYN because she's having some physical problems. And the amazing part is that without a physical exam, the doctor says, I already know what's wrong with you. And she says, well, how do you know that? You haven't examined me. She goes, well, I can just tell from looking at you. And that's the whole obsession with diet culture. And she launched into the beginning about eating only, I think it was 7 walnuts, and she was locked into this particular obsessive behavior. And that, I think, really sort of sets the tone for this episode.
Yeah, I think her story is all too common, where doctors want to tell us from looking at us what's happening, or they make judgments based on our weight. And as we say over and over, health is not a size. Weight does not determine health, and in any capacity. And it's interesting because also what I think is so relatable about Nicole's story and the piece that you shared is like, it can be one thing that then sends us, kind of on a spiral in some way. And so really, I love how Nicole talks about how, she really reclaimed her own health, and that food tracking apps and all these things can be sort of, they have pros and cons, and it's really about figuring out how to make them work for you if they're going to work for you. And it's okay to let them go.
And Nicole spent some time talking about MyFitnessPal as one of the apps because it's maybe one of the most popular. But what I thought was interesting is you said people get locked into this whole idea of just measuring the calories. And so they don't look at protein intake or fiber consumption. Of course, those also affect your weight, your size, your health, so forth. And a lot of times we just get locked into I set 1,700 calories, MyFitnessPal, I can't go guess. Well, you can get to 1,700 calories a good way or a bad way.
Right, exactly. The other thing too, I just think there's so many other ways to track data and information. And so, it comes down to you and recognizing like what's going to help you kind of clear the headspace. I'm not a fan of keeping track of everything in your head, right? So, but that also, to get it out of your head, doesn't have to be one of these apps if it doesn't serve you.
Yeah, and she mentioned that people have a tendency to try the same thing. They just have a different name. So she said specifically, so people have tried paleo, keto, all different things. So they're all different diet restrictions. But they end up with the same result. And that frustrates them, obviously.
Yeah, for sure. And I also like in the episode, she talked about, how can we sort of look inward instead of outsourcing everything to all the rules and what the apps are telling us, and carbs are bad or sugar is bad. And, fruit, goodness, that's terrible, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That, what actually has us feeling our best, and how can we use that to drive our choices and keep us moving forward.
And then one last thing, which I thought was interesting, towards the end, she talked about the evil demon BMI. And she said how people go to healthcare providers and just by looking at them, that's the thing about BMI. It's easy. You don't need to do a lot of calculation. You don't have to examine anybody. And they'll just say to a patient, well, your BMI is high. So you're obviously either, overweight, slightly obese, or obese. And then just with that information, there's no conclusion there. For example, I'm actually the same height and weight as a running back on my favorite NFL team.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to laugh.
Yeah, that's okay. So basically, he is in a lot better shape than I am, but we have the exact same BMI. So that doesn't really tell you very much.
Yeah, we have an episode, BMI is BS. And actually, what was it? Fall of 2019, I wrote a TED Talk, BMI is BS. And then the pandemic happened and I stopped applying for, TEDx events. And now it's actually interesting. So there's been so much movement on the BMI conversation that there's potentially revisions to the calculation coming. We'll see. But you can go back. Our episode, BMI is BS, is from the very first year of the show. And I even talked about like where that measurement came from and then what to do when you go to your healthcare provider. And that's their metric.
Yeah.
So awesome. All right. Number 4 from this year aired May 29th. This was my pick. Take your foot off the gas. And it's about reverse dieting. And I chose this one because, again, I feel like it's the thing that a lot of people overlook, that, again, in this world of eat less, move more, everyone is afraid of eating more. And that's exactly what's needed. Most people, when they come to me, are under eating. Yeah. And this is really the whole thing about taking your foot off the gas and reverse dieting. even goes back to what we were saying about your first pick, Frank, with the stress factor is like, let go of the vice grip. It's all going to be fine. Let's give our body some more fuel, and then when we're ready, we can potentially give it another push in terms of, the nutrition or the fitness or another piece. But like, take your foot off the gas, relax, let go of the vice, and we can start to see some results. Because when we're always sort of clenching so tight and trying to make it happen, the body is experiencing that as a stressor.
And you had mentioned in the episode, you gave a great example, which is for people who are bodybuilders who go to competitions. So they are really going to slim down as far as fat percentage of body fat because they need to really look cut. But then after the competition, their diet changes because now they don't need to do that. So they need to get back to a more realistic body fat percentage and wait until the next competition. And I think that was interesting because that second part people don't do. They just, all right, I'm at 170 pounds. I have to do whatever it takes to stay there. And then, of course, that's too hard to do sometimes.
Yeah. And we expect so much of ourselves that I think another piece that we emphasized in this episode was really the role of consistency and balance. And frankly, if we lived 100% of the time in consistency and balance, we'd probably see the quote unquote results that everybody's looking for.
No, you're right. And you had said in there that there's this whole idea of a phase of less intensity. And of course, that's the take your foot off the gas, which, by the way, when I read the title of this episode right in the beginning, I'm like, oh, that's not what I thought it was going to be in the beginning. Thought it was going to be sort of a IBS bloating thing. And then, of course, it wasn't. But
that's funny.
Yeah. Like, oh, okay. I'm a man. So when we see the word gas, we immediately go. But yeah, so there has to be breaks in that intensity. No one can go 365 24/7 with that kind of control as far as, weight control and exercise control.
Yeah, for sure. All right, that brings us to number 5. Frank, this was yours, episode 275 from November 6th, Fitness Fact or Fiction, featuring Sarah Thomas.
Well, I have to say that this is actually my favorite episode. I've actually listened to this about 4 different times, and I loved her. I thought she was great. It seemed like the two of you have a very similar podcasts and philosophies. And actually, after listening to her, this episode, I went and listened to her podcast. And it's good.
Yeah.
And it's almost like if I close my eyes, it's the words coming from her are the words I've heard from you many times. And I think that's a great thing.
Right. So her show is called Burn, Fat, and Feast. I was interviewed on her show. She was interviewed on mine. And we definitely have a very similar vibe and approach. But I think we'll get to this in this was from a different year. We talked about digesting nutrition news and how can we tell what's, valid or whatever. And there's a piece of it in saying like the people who tell you you're only going to hear this here is kind of a flag. And so, yes, it's not that strange that you're hearing the same things from me and from Sarah. And frankly, we need to hear these things a bunch of times in a bunch of different ways and all that kind of stuff. What I loved about this episode was I feel like she made the fitness piece very approachable and also provided some ways for us to just get it done, do the things and make it a piece of our overall wellness rather than 1,000% the only strategy we have in place.
Now, in this episode, you have one of my favorite quotes of all time. You may have used it before, but in talking with her about what she described cardio queens. So one of the things you said was, you can't outrun your fork. And I absolutely love that because I know people who are runners, and we actually had somebody for Thanksgiving and they had an extra piece of pie. And after the pie, they said, well, tomorrow I'm going to have to run another 3 miles. And I said to her, you can't outrun your fork. And I heard that from an expert. But I just love that because people always believe that they can.
Yes. So by the way, we have that phrase on some merch, like
I love that.
Tank tops and t-shirts, it's so true. And again, because we've been told eat less, move more, we equate these two things. And the reality is that's not how the body works. You can't say, hey, body, let's burn the pie, right?
Exactly. And one of the things that she mentioned that has an impact for me anyway, is because I'm older, is that there's this whole idea that metabolism slows down as you age. And the both of you together made what I thought was a spectacular point, which is metabolism slows down, not necessarily because you age, but because you lose muscle mass. And I took that to heart. We actually discussed that actually at Thanksgiving a little bit. And I think that's a great point that people should grab and a nugget to hold on to.
Yeah, for sure. And again, it's one of those things that like we hear these things all the time. Well, your metabolism slows down. Well, why? Right? If we know muscle dictates metabolism, then stands to reason. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. We're about halfway through. So let's pause here, take a quick break to highlight our partner for this episode, and then we'll come back with the rest. Good?
Good. All set.
All right. Big thanks to Snap Cleaning Products for supporting Salad with a Side of Fries. Make household and industrial cleaning a snap with their eco-friendly, economical, multi-purpose Snap products. Snap's concentrated multi-purpose formulas perform light to industrial strength jobs all in one bottle. Snap products give you the cleaning power of a variety of cleaners, saving you time, money, and valuable storage space. And Snap products are developed with the environment in mind, using plant-based ingredients that are biodegradable, phosphate-free, non-toxic, and bottled in recyclable containers. So 2024 is winding down, right? I'll bet in 2025, you'd like to spend less time cleaning your home. I get it. I have to say, Snap is the easy button for cleaning. The secret to using Snap is letting them sit. Because they're all made of enzymes, they have to hang out. We have to give time for the enzymes to do their work. So you spray on the cleaner and then do something else, come back a few minutes later, like maybe 5 minutes later, and everything just wipes clean. From your dishes to bathroom and kitchen services, Snap really does it all in my home. It can do the same in your home too. You could start with just the Snap dishwashing liquid for $11.95. You get 32 ounces. The dishwashing crystals for your dishwasher are just $9 for 30 ounces. That does up to 120 loads of dishes in the dishwasher. Like, I know, it's a lot. Maybe you're ready to upgrade all your household cleaning products in one fell swoop. You can do that with the Snap Pack for just $89.95. By the way, all these prices are before your discount. Because you're a Salad with a Side of Fries listener, you get 10% off and free shipping. So simply text the word CLEAN, CLEAN, to 844-947-4846. You'll receive the link and coupon code right to your phone. Again, text the word CLEAN, CLEAN, to 844-947-4846 to try Snap. Maybe you want the Snap Pack. Whatever you get, it's 10% off and you get free shipping. This is a toll-free number. Standard text and data rates may apply. Okay, Frank, let's do the next one. Oh, this one was one of mine. So this was episode 242, which aired March 20th, the ultimate biohack. So funny enough, this goes back to where we started this conversation with number one. The ultimate biohack, spoiler, is sleep. And, you know, we could be trying everything, but if we're not sleeping, right, all of these things, like all of the biohacks, by the way, this also ties into an episode we did this year called BioStack over Biohack. So in that one, I talked about how the technical definition of a biohack is something that gives a 10% improvement. Well, 10%, no offense, it's not that much if we're not in a place of almost optimal health, right?
Yeah.
So frankly, if, you know, the biohacks that I always think of, it's, you know, the cold plunge, I don't know, that's the one that always comes to my head. But all of these things that we could try to do, if we're not sleeping, it's going to be one step forward, two steps back, right? We're deteriorating our health more by not sleeping than we could get from any biohack.
Sure. And to connect those episodes together in that one episode, I think it was Nicole who said that she had gained weight, 15 pounds. And What was it that she was struggling with? Stress, but also lack of sleep. And so, you think, because in a lot of podcasts, including yours, we talk about the importance of sleep, but you still see a lot of people don't get it. And I'll give you a really quick example. I know someone who's in the Navy and is actually in the submarine corps in Connecticut. And the way they do the shifts, they only get to sleep 3-4 hours in a 24-hour period. Now, I'm not sure that they're going to be at optimum mental, physical, psychological condition after only 4 hours of sleep in a day. So you have an organization there that's still promoting this is the way we're going to run our duty call, is by only 4 hours of sleep. So the information needs to get out there to more people and more organizations.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. I can't remember what it is, but it's something, it might even be that 3-4 hours of sleep. Somebody's driving or decision-making equates to somebody who's intoxicated.
Yes.
I can't remember the actual statistic there, but it's really true. And I think there's so much that we don't realize happens when we sleep. And it's so easy to sleep less, right? We want to watch the movie. We want to be social. We want to, do more in our day or have more time in the day. And this is maybe one of my biggest pet peeves with all of the personal development gurus, is that they're all saying, sleep when you die, find more time in the day, wake up 2 hours earlier, all those things. And in theory, that sounds great, but what are we really doing? And by the same token, on the biohacking front, with supplements, I think I said it in this episode, you can't supplement your way out of poor nutrition either. Like you were saying with the outrun your fork. No amount of supplements will do for your body what sleep does.
No, and again, to connect the dots here. So as you know, we know now that when you sleep, go back to the ad that you just had about detergent. When you sleep, and you have to sleep enough, your brain actually has this whole process that's like a detergent, where it takes out all the junk that you've collected during the day, your lymphatic system, I believe.
Yes.
Right? And then it cleans it all up. So if you don't sleep enough, what happens is you have that residual, I'm not sure what it is, but it's
gunk.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah, good. Very good. So you do need that time in order to actually cleanse your brain. And you're not going to be able to get that based on the stages of sleep, because you're not even there yet after the third hour. So you need to get 7-8 hours sleep.
Yeah. And that's generally what's recommended. And then I would also say to people, when do you feel your best? On those days where you have consecutively 7-8 hours of sleep, maybe you feel better with 8.5 hours. Everybody's a little different in that way. But yeah, cannot overestimate or overemphasize the importance of sleep. So that was this episode. And we have a few episodes on sleep, but this one in particular, I think, puts it in the context of all the other things that we hear about in wellness.
And your point about supplements is so well taken, because there are podcasts out there where the host will come on and say, they'll give you a problem and then they'll give you a supplement. Oh, you think you might have dementia? Hey, I have an itch, have tiger's paw. Or you think you have this, take this. That's not really that much different than your medical provider giving you a script. It's just that it's not a script, but it's a supplement. And before you know it, you're in this idea of, I have this physical problem. All I need to do is do this and it'll be fixed. And of course, it's much more complicated than that.
Yeah. And I'm a big fan of supplements. I work with supplements a lot in my practice. I actually lead trainings on supplements and ingredients and the matching people with products and things like that. But to your point, they're not the be all end all. And on their own, without, in tandem with lifestyle choices and the other things we're doing, again, we're relying on these things to do so much that, we're undoing with our daily choices.
Exactly. And one area, you're right about that. You have to make choices. I'll just give you a quick personal example is, I take a blood pressure medication. Every time I see to my cardiologist, though, the first thing he says is, your goal is not to be taking that. It's actually working for you. Your goal is to change your lifestyle so that you don't have to take it anymore. And that's why I love my cardiologist, because I
was going to say, I love your doctor.
Yeah, because there's wisdom in that.
Yeah, it's really funny. I can't even tell you how many times I have clients who go back to their doctor after they've implemented things, and oftentimes it's after their doctor has put them on medication and their doctors go, oh, great, the meds are working. And it's like, we have to then tell our physician all the things we're doing and then work with them to kind of lower that dose and taper. And
Exactly.
all right, let's go to number 7 of our top 10. This one aired September 25th, episode 269, Caveman Biology in a Very Modern World, featuring Dr. Kathy Campbell. Frank, this was one of your picks. Tell us why you liked it.
Yeah, this lady was really interesting. I love her background. She was quite amazing. One of the things she said I thought really stood out in the episode is she said nowadays people treat food as medicine and medicine as food. And she said that one of the problems with that, which is a large one, is that people in the medical field don't know anything about food, and people in the food field don't know anything about medicine. So that disconnect shows that even though you're treating food as medicine, both sides of that equation really don't know essentially what they're talking about yet. Anyway.
Yeah, and I think it depends on the practitioner, and it's interesting because dietitians and nutritionists, this is sort of a tangent. We didn't necessarily talk about this in the episode, but dietitians and nutritionists in their schools are being taught the my plate thing, which is still really outdated and based on the government's recommendations, which the government's recommendations are still growing from the original recommendations that were based on a person not deteriorating into rickets and scurvy, not based on somebody actually having health and energy and vitality and a long life of wellness, Yeah. So it's even a challenge unless the practitioner has made an effort to really go out and understand pieces in all of these areas, and be that person who can help bridge that gap. We actually have an episode next year planned with somebody. We're calling it, the yes and in Western medicine, right? So yes and is an improv approach, right, in theater, but it's the idea of like this and, right? So we have Western medicine and we have nutrition and so how do we bring these things together? And I think with Dr. Kathy, going back to this episode, to me, one of the most important things is that the body is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It is reacting to the world that we are living in now, right? And you end up with this disconnect between our biology and our world where the phone buzzing is tantamount to being chased by a saber-toothed tiger in the stress response. Or we think we're eating food, but they're really food-like substances that aren't providing the body with nutrition. And so how can we sort of reclaim that and bridge the gap for ourselves?
I'm glad you said that because in that episode, both you and Dr. Campbell sort of came up with this collective wisdom. And this question you both ask is, how is it possible that we could actually overeat but be undernourished? And when you think about the counterintuitive possibilities of that, how is that possible?
Yeah, it's because we are eating food that is devoid of nutrition, right? We're eating food-like substances that give our bodies, more chemicals or modified food, in air quotes, right? We're eating these things. They taste good. It seems like food, but they're not actually providing the body with the nutrients that the body is looking for and needs in order to do all of its functions.
Yeah. And at the end of the episode, she did start talking about Wegovy and its other cousins. And I thought she made a couple of good points. One is, and I had read this before, that with any of those GLP-1, you can lose a lot of muscle mass as you're losing weight, number one. And number two is, it's always what you say, is that just losing the weight without making sustained lifestyle choices isn't going to be enough.
Absolutely. And I have clients who are on it, on these meds. I have people who come to me all the time wanting, and the truth is, like, it's interesting because we see all the same side effects as my clients from years ago who were all lap band patients. And we see a lot of the same malnutrition, a lot of the same issues and challenges after the fact. And so what ends up happening is that when we're using these medications, when we're using these surgical interventions or all these other tools, it actually makes our food choices infinitely more important. And so while we want it to be the easy button, it really requires an even greater commitment and recognizing, just like your cardiologist said, the objective is to get off of them, right? We need a plan in place to get off of them. And when we get off of them, learning to manage cravings and riding those waves and figuring out all the lifestyle and behavioral things so that we can maintain the results and start to build muscle again in all these things.
Right. And last point she made is she said, in her practice, she said, I don't know how many times I see middle-aged women who are thin, but they're not healthy, and they have significant hormonal, nutritional, and metabolic issues, which goes back to what you always say is that health is not a size.
Right. Absolutely. All right. So everybody, highly recommend going back and listening to that one. All right. Number 8 aired November 20th. This was one of my picks, 8 domains of health. And really why I like this one is because I think so many people say, where do I start? What do I do? How do I know if all my blood work is fine? What do I need to focus on? What do I do? And that's really what this episode boils down to in the end. I give, the top 3 places to start that will then kind of spill over into the other domains. But it gives us a way of sort of checking in and saying, well, how am I doing? The other thing we did in this episode was give everybody sort of mentally a scale of like -10 to +10 on each of these domains. How am I doing? How do I feel? And sometimes even going off of that is just as valid as blood work from your doctor.
Yeah. And this goes back to, I think, sort of the philosophical underpinning of your podcast, which is just being thin doesn't mean you're healthy, and just being not thin doesn't mean you're not healthy. And so all of these domains play into a definition of whether you're healthy or not. And those go from, hormonal to body composition to, as you said before, sleep, inflammation. It isn't simply a matter of what your waist size is.
Yeah. And in that spectrum, right, there's a difference between health and optimal health, right? And so none of that is static. So at any given time, we might feel dramatically differently on that spectrum of -10 to +10. And so one more piece that I think is worth mentioning from that episode is we also talked about the value of getting to 0. Like if you're getting from like a minus anything to 0, it can feel just as amazing as getting to the +10. And so that's not to discount, kind of that baseline 0 value of health,
Yeah, that's a great point, because I think if you can set yourself up for failure simply by setting an expectation that A, isn't realistic, and B, is probably so limiting, you probably don't even want to pick that as a goal. So
right.
As you're saying, your goal should be a little bit more wide ranging than just, this is what my weight to be.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Number 9 is from May 8th, episode 249, memory, why we lose it, and how to keep it. Frank, this was your pick.
Oh, well, I love this one for a lot of reasons. First of all, because so for people who can't see me, I am at least 30 years older than Jenn. So I'm not young.
I don't know about that.
I believe so. But so anyway, when people get older, obviously they worry about any little sign that their memory is slipping. And certainly we always talk about forgetting things as a symptom that your memory might be slipping and potentially a problem with dementia. But one of the keys here, which I thought was really great, and I think this applies especially to women as well, is you said there's no such thing as multitasking. And I thought that was simply a great insight, because when you think about it, it's really true. There's plenty of people that tell you we don't multitask. We don't really have that ability. We can do a lot of things in sequence, and maybe in 10 minutes, we can do 5 different things, but we're not generally doing them at the same time. And I thought that was great because it kind of sets the tone for how we use our memory and how it impacts our daily lives.
Yeah, it's funny because I often feel like I'm the queen of the multitaskers, So it's true. But the point is exactly right. Like when we're doing anything, we're really focused on one thing. And the whole piece of this is also worked in tandem with another episode where we talked about the connection between brain health and blood sugar, because Alzheimer's is actually referred to as diabetes type 3. And so what we see is this true connection between our metabolic health and our brain health, how our brains function. And the good news of that is we really have a lot of control in this situation, that we're sort of not doomed to the aging memory. And by the way, sleep plays into this also, right? We got that lymphatic system. So really, this one, it's sort of the real life application of all of the things that we talk about. And I think it applies it to something that we notice more than other things, or maybe more, when we're like, where are my keys? Where are my glasses? And they're on my head, all of those kinds of things.
Yeah. And the one part that was in the episode is this whole idea of scheduling or planning your day. And there's a quote in there where it says you really need to keep it realistic and don't beat yourself up if your schedule doesn't go according to plan. And I mean, I think that's certainly a key point.
Yeah, for sure. It's, I live and breathe based on my calendar. Like if it's not in there with an alarm to remind me to do something. But actually, it's interesting because I no longer use a to-do list. Everything ends up in the calendar at a time slot with an allocated period of time to do the thing.
Wow.
For what it's worth, that has been life-changing. One of my favorite things from that episode before we do number 10, a 2% increase in brain hydration can promote concentration, memory recall, and reaction time. Proper hydration is linked to productivity, healthy mood, mental and emotional balance, cognitive function, sensory fitness, reaction time, and hydration status are all connected.
As you just said that, I'm drinking more water right now as we speak.
Yeah. And remember, we have an episode on hydration from a few years ago where hydration is more than just water. It's also our minerals. So maybe we'll do an electrolytes conversation next year. So, all right. Last one, number 10. This was my pick from August 21st, episode 264. This was live from New York. It's salad with a side of fries. So this was the 5-year anniversary episode, live event in New York City that we recorded. Maybe for selfish reasons, I love this one. I think, first of all, for an independent podcast, and Frank, you know this, for an independent podcast to do a live show is really a rare thing. And it was an experiment. And I did the whole thing as a Q&A. And it was so much fun. I loved doing it. I loved how the episode came out. And I think that's the other piece of why it's one of my favorites, is because if you're new to this show or you're not sure what this is all about, I feel like that one is such a great entry point to get the vibe of what we do and what this is all about.
I couldn't agree with you more. And of course, I was there. Thank you for inviting me and had a great time. It's funny when people do live podcasts, and I've been to quite a few of them. And first of all, you're right that when you're an independent podcaster setting up a live event, not only financially, but just as far as structurally and so forth, it's a big task as well. But I'm not sure what's in your mind, but I think when you did the podcast, two things happen. I've been to live podcasts where they do the live podcast as if they're just doing their regular podcast. So what ends up happening is once they cut off the mics and that's the end of the episode, people can answer questions and so forth, but it's not the same thing. So you made a conscious decision in order to, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do a regular episode. I'm going to talk for a bit. And I like your talk because you actually were able to summarize sort of the philosophical underpinning of the entire podcast and your whole, fitness philosophy, which is great. And then people enthusiastically ask questions. I was there. There was no shortage of hands. As a matter of fact, I know for timing's sake, you had actually cut it off, but we could have probably gone for easily another hour.
Yeah, it's funny. I had also, just in case people needed a warm up, I had planted a couple questions. We didn't need those at all. So those questions remain, but it was the energy in the room, I think, was palpable. And it is my hope that came through in what turned out to be the episode. And I agree with you. I think a lot of times when we go to a live podcast, we're watching two people sit in chairs, which is not all that compelling.
Exactly.
It's also kind of my pet peeve with all the video podcasts is like, this is not compelling video. Like, I don't know, but whatever.
No. I know And one last item on that, which I thought was great. And being to enough of these, there's times when the podcasters, you sit in the chair, they come out, they'll be at a desk, they'll do their show, and then they're gone. And so I've been to a couple. Actually, I was with my cousin at yours, and we were just at one a couple months before that. We're so excited. We never got to meet the people. They just did their show, and then off the stage they were. Now, for the people who weren't there, who are listening, Jenn was available before the show. She was available after the show. And one thing that stuck with me, and I think I told her this before, is when I went to get our name tags, I met this lovely woman who's younger than me, but my age. And when I looked at her and I started talking with her, I'm like, "You're Jenn's mom, aren't you?" And she said, "Yes." And she was such a wonderful woman. And I thought it was so great that she was so proud of her daughter. So that was pretty amazing.
Thank you. Yes, my mom was there. My dad was there with his wife and lots of friends and family. I mean, it was definitely what happens when an independent podcaster is putting together an event. It's like, "Hey, Mom, I'm going to put you to work." But it was great. They're the best. And
it was a great show, too. Really an excellent live event. Good decision on your part to do it that way.
Oh, thank you. All right, let's do like 30-second versions of our bonus picks because there were a couple more. Frank, you want to start with one of yours?
Yeah, so one of my favorites is IBS is a BS diagnosis. And I tend to like any of your episodes that have BS in them. Like you said earlier about BMI is a BMS. But I like this one. This had a health coach, Hannah
Elward.
Yeah. And she walked through common recommendations of elimination diets that really don't work. They're not a good forever solution. And she really did mention something. Now, I suffer from, I'm doing quote unquote IBS because she goes in and says, IBS isn't really a thing. It's sort of a constellation of different symptoms that no one can get a handle on. And so we throw them into this syndrome. And I thought that was really terrific of that she talked about that because sometimes we're skeptical of things like that.
For sure. So one of my bonus ones was the Nutrition Nugget Enough. That aired May 31st. I like this one because I feel like we're always told to do more. And we can feel like there's, a never-ending to-do list and that we're just not quite cutting it. And so this one basically says, that's just patently wrong. And everything you're doing is 100% enough. So I love that reminder for everybody.
Yeah. And wasn't it the time management expert, Megan, who talked about her 5 steps? And then she mentioned about developing she has this whole management solution, but whatever your solution is, you had to manage the process during the day. Don't let it manage you, which was her whole point. Yeah. Yeah,
exactly. So that was also one of your bonus episodes. So that aired March 13th, episode 241. There's Not Enough Time in the Day, featuring Megan Sumrell.
Right.
So I like that one too. All right. My last bonus one is Nutrition Nugget, Your Acceptance Speech. So this one aired February 9th. And if you're like me, where when someone asks, what's your why? You just roll your eyes, right? Even though I know my why, I feel like the question just makes me want to roll my eyes. It feels like such a big question. And so the idea of your acceptance speech, it's a different way to get clear on the end goal. And then more than that, how you're going to get there. And I feel like approaching it this way, it's fun. I think it's even inviting into the process rather than making you, and by you, I mean me, want to just shut down, at even the question. So awesome.
Yeah, no, excellent.
Okay, great. All right. Now we made it through our top 10. I hope we gave everybody a playlist to go back to over these holidays when maybe you're lounging by the pool and there's some extra listening time, or as you're deciding what you're going to focus on in the new year. So awesome. All right. Then on this Friday, we have our final nutrition nugget of 2024, and it's called Daily. So if you're a longtime listener, you know that the last Nutrition Nugget bonus episode of the year is going to be a bit about creating, the 2025 of your dreams. So how does this topic of daily translate into your dream year? Well, you'll find out on Friday. So tune in on Friday.
I'm excited.
Be sure to click. Right. Be sure to click the follow or the plus sign on the app where you're listening, and then the app will alert you when it's live on Friday morning at 3 a.m. Eastern. As always, everybody, I'm your host, Jenn Trepeck. Connect with me on Instagram or all social media. I am at Jenn Trepeck, JENNTREPECK. Website is asaladwithasideofries.com. Pick your platform, send a message. I love hearing from you. So send your takeaways, your ideas, your questions. This is also the easiest way to learn more about working with me as your health coach. We can get you on the path to health and freedom in 2025. And of course, if you are not already, join our membership program by going to glow.fm/saladwithasideofries. This shows your support for this podcast, this community, and most importantly, it supports your health. You'll get this week's recipes for the healthy creamed spinach and the healthier potato skins, plus access to your quarterly live session, which will be just you and me. So while we have our Nutrition Nugget on Friday, this is the final full episode of 2024. So I want to say thank you. Thank you for your feedback. Thank you for sharing this podcast with your friends and family. And thank you for how you show up each week. Here's to another landmark year in 2024. And let's make 2025 even better together. Well, friends, that's it for today's episode of Salad with a Side of Fries. Congratulations for making yourself and your health a priority. Thanks so much for joining us. Be sure to click subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast platform. Share us with a friend, and we'll be back next week. Always remember, you deserve it, and you are worth it. Happy healthy.